Hey, everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. You hear that pause? That's just how many podcasts we produce now. I had to think, am I saying the right one? But all great stuff. I know you and I both contribute a lot to the industry, Adam. What I want to talk about this series is how to retain more lean body mass in prep. I'm on this big training kick after doing our fantasy camp training edition. And the first thing that I think is important, and we'll go through a list, see what you agree with, Adam, and maybe what you want to add to, is just maintaining good force production. So differently stated than just having the right kind of training, but intentionally, as I want to lay this out and frame it, creating and maintaining the best force production, because strength is going to change. You have to accept a little of that. Your training frequency and duration may change a little bit because of the calorie deficit. That would all be appropriate. But the kind of intensity that you generate, that the way that you're stimulating the muscle fiber down to that cellular level, I think is pretty important. So I just don't know if you've thought about it, or maybe you want to even touch on those other variables with training, Adam. But in prep specifically, why is that mentality and execution in the gym so important when you're dieting?
Well, you do want to push, you want to push leverages hard. Uh, this is, I'm really glad you brought this up because this seems to be such a contradictory topic right now on, training to failure during prep. And I'm not against intense training, but oftentimes when we train to failure, for bench press, for instance, we start, really tucking in our elbows and then we're bringing our triceps into it. Well, now we're taking the leverages off the chest. And so are we really hitting failure with our chest completely because we're bringing our triceps into it? So when I do RPE with my clients, we really like to talk about what is that and what does that look like? So you're hitting close to failure and then you just kind of stop at the point that weight cannot move anymore, or explain to your spotter so you can keep tension on the prescribed muscle group and not bring it to your triceps or something else. So you're still kind of reaching that maximum threshold without drawing a bunch of other muscle groups into it. Because a really advanced trainee might be able to train to failure and not move outside of the normal motion movement patterns, but most trainees are not going to be able to do that. So it is different per context, per person, but I think most people do need a little bit of let up towards the end of a set to have the right leverages in play.
It makes me happy that you brought that up, because the entire premise of the advanced training fantasy camp we did was based on functional anatomy first. So every single variable you can talk about and explore with training, we covered, but functional anatomy first. Do you know what the origin and insertion patterns are for that particular muscle you're trying to pursue? Because to your point, bodybuilding for hypertrophy or bikini competition or anything else in physique sport is massively overlapping with strength sport and other ways of training, but it's still very different. And it's still very directed toward training muscle, not movement pattern. So that's a really, really good point. And I think in this calorie deficit model that we're talking about, because you are going to feel a little bit less energy, glycogen stores are not as full. It's easy to get, I don't want to say lazy, because most of us in prep are pretty ambitious and we're really motivated by the contest, but you just kind of get distracted by not feeling your best and you forget that it's still all about the contractile force and what you're producing there. So I think that's a really good point. What else, when it comes to just maintaining that kind of focus on muscle tissue in the gym, do you think it's important when you're in prep?
I might need you to repeat that one more time. I'm not sure I understood the question there.
So when we are just looking at, I'm in prep, you've got a client who's been dieting for 12 or 16 weeks and you're nearing the end and you're saying, hey, look, what you do in the gym still matters. This is here's what I want you to focus on. Whatever kind of training variables you're changing with them, is there one thing that you say, this is what we cannot lose sight of because we're in prep regarding our training?
Yeah, I do think that we can get demotivated by our strength going down, and to not let that call it quits on your workout early, obviously, or get too depressed about certain movements. I think our last podcast I mentioned, focus on some of the things you can actually perform better on because your body weight's lighter, or even focus on coefficient. Also, don't be so strength focused, because that's really when injury is going to come into play. So, I just had this conversation with a client. She hurt her back deadlifting. And I said, I was the same way in every prep. Just because I could lift that weight didn't always mean that I should. And sometimes we need to find that happy medium, and that can be really risky. And I told her, maybe film a couple of your sets, and I can kind of see if you're going hard enough, or maybe pushing that potential lower back injury threshold on your deadlifts a little bit more. So she can kind of have a second eye and help her gauge that, because that's obviously a problem since we're dealing with the injury.
Yeah, and obviously nothing is going to hurt your chance at a contest more than being injured and having to limp in to the end of the prep. So perfect, Adam. Very well said. And we will see you guys next time in Contest Prep University as we continue on in the series, how to maintain the most muscle in prep.